For our fourth episode of Unscripted Real Talk for Right Now, we're joined by Ron Deal, a good friend of ours from Little Rock, Arkansas. Ron is a master at helping families learn how to function well, and his words and advice in this podcast are fantastic for us as we look ahead into the future and consider how do we navigate all this with our family and friends. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Unscripted. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for taking the time to talk.
You bet, Chris. It's good to be with you again.
Yeah, just to give everybody a little bit of context, we worked together like 17-ish years ago.
Yeah.
And
has it been that long? I guess it probably has, hasn't it? It's been a long time.
And it was before I had gray hair, and Polly and I had not been married too terribly long, and you and Nan were so good to us, and hold you guys in just the highest regard, and so thankful for your life, for your ministry. So, hey, as we get started, will you kind of catch us up on what you're doing and tell us about your family?
Yeah, you bet. So Nan and I have been married for 34 years. We now live in Little Rock, Arkansas. We have 3 boys. Our middle son, Connor, passed away when he was 12. He was born in Jonesboro. Our youngest son, Brennan, was also born in Jonesboro, and he's now 21. Our oldest, Braden, is 25, about to be 26. And so, we just walking with the Lord as best we know how. Nan's a teacher. I work for Family Life, which is a large international marriage and family organization that's got a footprint in over 100 countries around the world, as well as does conference events and national radio broadcast and different things here in the United States. And I just have the privilege of leading the Blended Families division of that ministry. So I get to do marriage and family education from a parachurch standpoint on a regular basis. And I really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun.
2 things about what you just said. I know you've written a few books.
Mm-hmm. A few.
Yeah. Tell us about
I've written 8 books.
You've written 8 books now?
Yeah, I'm working on number 9. Contributed to another 8, and probably have another half dozen resources and video curriculum and different things that are published materials that are available.
Okay, so if anybody wants to check those out, learn more about your stuff, where do they go?
Well, there's there's a million places you can go. You can get books anywhere books are sold. They'll be available, whether Amazon or Barnes & Noble or FamilyLife.com is of course, the organization that I work with. My personal website would be rondeal.org, and you can find information about my podcast, articles, curriculum, resources, online training. All of that's available through those sites. So
a lot of that I've used and seen is just excellent, and I referred a number of people to your work. So thank you for that. And
yeah, thank you.
I got to point out one thing. There's a piece of art right behind you. I believe that Connor's song back there.
Right there.
Our
giant Lego that we built in honor of our son Connor. This sits in Ghana, West Africa, and it serves children who had been trafficked and then rescued and now raised by a nonprofit called the Touch a Life Foundation. And so this is their place of fun and creative arts, called the Connor Creative Arts Center. And so it's really a place of healing, as well as an educational opportunity for them. And we're just thrilled to go every year and spend time with the kids and just have a small role in what that place is. I will brag a little bit. This art center, we created a giant Lego, people started hearing about it. And our designer, who used to be on Extreme Makeover Home Edition, was the lead designer for that TV show for about 7 years. She's gone on now and designed 3 other art centers in different places around the world, 2 in Cambodia that minister to girls rescued out of sex trafficking, and another one in Honduras is kind of in the works. And so it's just been fun to be a small part of that and see Kim take the idea and go other places with it. So
it's really cool how you guys have taken that and run with it and been a blessing to people literally all around the world in the midst of a really difficult season in your life.
Well, you have a choice when you have loss, significant loss. You ultimately you have to find something to do with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I got a friend who calls it grief energy. You have this part of you that's undone, and what are you going to do with that? And I do think it's a part of the grieving. It doesn't fix it. I'm very quick to point out to people, I still mourn over my son every day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but at least I have something I can do that's tangible, that honors him and helps other people. And even now, when we're in this season of COVID, I think that's a principle that it really applies, that we should all be mindful of. Like, if you just sit in your house and stare at the walls, you're going to go crazy. I don't care who you are. I don't care how much money you have and what kind of your house looks like. You're going to get really tired of this, because we are all grieving at some level something that is not what we would want it to be, or not what it was. Life has changed, and for some people it's changed significantly. They've lost a job, somebody's died, they've not been able to go and be by their side. I mean, there's all kinds of stories of grief that are related to what we're experiencing. And at the end of the day, if you just sit and stare at the walls, then you can really get stuck in your grief, and that's not good for anybody.
I think I think this is a healthy thing that's come out in the midst of this, is that we are talking about grief,
Mm.
and we are beginning to talk about hard things. Those are beginning to surface in our life. So, in your work, you work a lot with blended families, but you understand families as a
Mm-hmm.
whole.
Mm-hmm.
How do families navigate the stress of this time?
Mm-hmm.
Right before we started this, I was telling you about, we're spending a lot of time together.
Yeah.
Uh, Everybody's at my house all the time now.
Yes. Yes.
Uh,
And and within that, I mean, there are points of grief. Like, you had these natural rhythms of life where you could get out of the home. The kids went to school, you went to work. You had places and spaces that were defined for different things, and you had the freedom to move in and out of those. And we've lost the freedom to do that. And so it's really, recalibrated us in many different ways. I did a little series where we talked about, finding your compass in the middle of, um, this uncharted territory. If you're going to try to navigate this, you're going to have a little compass to guide you. And, first it starts with true north. Who is God, and what does he mean to me, and what's my relationship with him? Because if I don't set my compass on true north, then everything's going to be off. You got to manage your fear and your anxiety in the midst of all this change, or things are going to go south, right? You've got to be able to deal with the rhythms, establish new rhythms and structures to your world in light of what is, so you don't go crazy, and you have something predictable in the midst of the big picture that remains unpredictable. And those are the different compass points, if you will, just kind of help us navigate through this. The grief part, I think, is really complicated, because there's a term we use for grief that is undefined. It's called ambiguous grief. And there's some elements of this whole journey for all of us that I think are pretty clear, but there's other parts that are undefined. It's like you have it, but you don't have it. So, for example, church is a really good example. You have it, but you don't have it. You can't go, you can't be with people, you can't sit and experience worship with others who care. You don't really have it. Restaurants, we have them, but we don't have them. You
Mm-hmm.
can kind of get drive through takeout, but you really can't go and sit and get the experience. Being with friends, well, we can talk right now. This is kind of fun, catching up with you and seeing you again, but it's not the same as sitting in the room together. And after a while, you get tired of Zoom. Like, it only goes so far. So we're connected, but we're not connected. See, all of that ambiguity, uh, you know, just sort of leaves the ground fragile underneath us. And you're not really sure where you stand unless you got your compass and you
Mm-hmm.
keep coming back to, what are the critical things that I need to hold on to? And again, I think it all starts with what true north is.
Uh, when you say that, I mean, my mind goes in just so many different directions, and clearly we're not here to chase my mind. We're here to talk to you. But, families, they land on true north. They begin to get centered in God. But then you talked about there's structures and there's rhythms.
Mm.
What are helpful structures and rhythms? I mean, what is family life pushing out and helping people realize in terms of helpful structures and rhythms in this season?
Yeah. So first tip there is you got to talk this out. You got to figure this out because see, before the COVID crazies, as I've come to call them, set in, the structures and rhythms of our life were kind of naturally there. Go to school, go to
Mhm.
work. Here's a space. This is what you do in this space. Then you go home, you do this in this space. Now's the time you interact with your kids. Now's the time when they go to bed. Those kind of naturally set up rhythms to life. Well, all of that has changed, and we're all in the same space trying to navigate work. And I got my work, you got your work. Somebody else has got school. We got 3 kids that got school. We got only 2 computers pads, whatever. All of a sudden we have to navigate and negotiate what space, when, where, how. And by the way, I think one of the overarching little guidelines you give yourself is we are not going to be as efficient during this season of life as we want to be, as we would normally be.
Sure.
And you cut yourself a break. I can tell you, talking to my wife, who's a teacher, who's interacting with parents a lot and teachers a lot, one of the things that it was a problem early on, and I kind of think people have begun to relax into this now, is that they had standards for their children to continue school at home, just like they would get if they were going to school. Like, that's not going to happen,
Right.
right? Cut yourself a break, cut your kids a break, find what is manageable, negotiate time, some space, and do something constructive. They need to learn. Yes, but then let it go. And I think that's even true for us in work climates.
Hmm.
I've tried to reduce what I expect out of myself, out of my team, out of people, and some things you can't drop, but other things it's just going to be all right. And so it's those kinds of things that you give yourself. It may feel artificial in terms of a structure or a rhythm, if you will, to how you're going to do your day, but at least you have something to expect from one another. Nan and I, every morning since this whole thing has started, have sat down and looked at our calendar for the day and said, what do you got going? When do you need quiet in the house? When do I need to step out of this space into that space? How do we work together? And we're having to do that on a daily basis. And because we stepped on each other's toes a few times when we first started into all of this, and it's like, oops, sorry, apologize. What are we going to learn from this? I think by now, most people have figured out some of those rhythms, some of those structures to their life. But I also am aware, as I've interacted with people, that for some, it's like, yeah, but I just didn't think it was going to last this long.
Yeah. Good point.
And today is like for me, it's week 9 that I've been at home, kind of stay at home under that mandate, not going to the office, all that kind of stuff. And it's like, boy, is this getting old? That's bringing a new level of anxiety to this. It's like you can do anything for a while, but is this going to be the new rhythm of our life?
Mhm.
Like, how long do we have to stay here? And I'm getting tired. And so I think that's brought this fresh anxiety that I'm going to have to talk through this, work through this, and figure out the rhythm in this all over again.
Listening to you, it sounds like we need to be really good about giving ourselves permission to not get everything right.
I agree.
But
I
then it
agree.
also seems like some of us are probably early adopters to giving ourselves grace and mercy in this
Mm.
season, and others of us are not. And it sounds like this is a lot like a race. Like maybe if you're running the mile, like, you've run 1 lap or 2 laps, but you go, man, I've still got some more laps to
Yeah.
run.
Yeah. Well, and the experience is different. So I'll just take my wife and I, for example. I've got a little space here that's an office that was kind of set up ahead of time. I do some work here occasionally at home. So that and my workplace got me set up. I got a nice microphone because I do interviews and podcasts on a regular basis. I got all this equipment here and I'm set. I can do my work. My wife being a teacher, teaching kindergarten, 5-year-olds over the internet. Like, what is that?
Mhm.
How does that work? Not really. She's really an IT consultant now. She's helping parents be the teachers, which is not why she became a teacher. It's not her passion. It's not her joy. So in many ways, I'm still producing and feel like I still have a whole day of work ahead of me, and she has much smaller in terms of expectations for herself, even what she can do, what she's allowed to do by the school system. Creativity has been stifled in so many ways for her. So her experience of this has been much harder than it has been for me. Then there's those expectations of each other. Like, she's like, hey, I think this is vacation. We can sit around and talk during the day. I'm like, I can't do that,
Yeah.
but can we carve out moments where I could do that? Well, that's required something of me in this, that I've had to say, you know what, I'm going to have to let go of, change my expectation about, so that I can be sensitive to her and minister to her even within this. So within any given family, you got a family of 5, you may have 5 totally different experiences of how this is going. Somebody's enjoying the fire out of this. It's a blast being at home.
Yeah, it's
Somebody
just
else is miserable.
right, and it's constant give and take. Even like recording this, Polly, my wife, just a little while ago reminded Isaac, "Hey, Dad's got something he's doing this afternoon, and our internet's been a little sketchy." And so there have been times in the past few weeks when I've done this where we're like, "Turn off all the devices. Dad gets all the internet."
That's right.
Well, the boys don't like that because they've got things that they want to do.
Yeah,
That,
right.
that requires bandwidth, and Dad's talking it all, but I tell
what
him
I'm talking.
Jesus, and it's okay. And
that's the thing I'm talking about. That's negotiating spaces and rhythms and needs, and that's a daily conversation for an awful lot of people. And I do think you begin to recognize there's a new normal in this. If you're like me, I was a kind of a slow adopter to this. I mean, there was a measure of denial in me, like, yeah, this is going to come and go. It's going to be okay, And you settle into a routine, and then after a couple of weeks, you're like, no, I think this is hanging around, and wow, this is getting whoa, okay, looks like this is the truth now. You have that sort of weird emotional experience with what's happening, and eventually you kind of settle into it. I'm really wondering about how this is going to change us. I mean, I think some people will go back to life without skipping a beat and just step right back in where they were. I think there will be some people that will be changed forever, and they will always have something different. Maybe it's just one element of their life, but something will be pretty significantly different for them beyond this. I think it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. I do think that some of us will be recalibrated in terms of what we think true north is. We will have been reminded that relationships are important, that God is important, that we will be a little less obsessed about things that don't really matter. And then we will focus on stuff that does matter, right? I mean, I think that will be true. I think this is a great time for all of us to be asking, what am I learning in all of this?
Yeah.
And what am I going to take away from it? And be reflecting on whether I'm going to be somebody who grows from this or just somebody who goes right back to where I was.
You've written extensively about blended families and the ups and the downs that come with that. What are the things that make this season unique for blended families, or maybe what are kind of things blended families need to be aware of in this season?
Yeah, well, I would lump in some other folks, single parents, anybody who has a child who's supposed to be moving back and forth between homes, for example. That, we did a Facebook Live not too long ago where I talked about just co-parenting and some of the challenges, and even had an article published in U.S. News and World Report over this because, legally, co-parenting standards and whatever your divorce decree says is still in play. But how comfortable do you feel about sending kids to another household? Maybe their practices in terms of what the CDC is asking people to do are not the same. Maybe they're not taking this seriously. We've heard from a lot of people, and that's the case. And then they don't want to send their kids, or they don't want to have the kids come back because then they're exposing this household. Or maybe you have one parent saying, a bio parent saying, yeah, I want my kids coming back. And the step parent's going, no, because they might bring something to my kids. And now you have this little rift going on between the couple over safety issues. So, this is pretty serious stuff. And so I think that The nuance there is you strive to have a decent conversation with the other household, the other parent, your co-parent, whatever you want to call yourself, and say, all right, what's safe for the kids and what's safe for all of us? And how do we take care of one another? If we can't agree, we're going to fall back on what the CDC says to do. Let's try to be as reasonable about this as we can be. But I do think I've talked with people that have had circumstances where they've had to say, no, kids, I won't be able to see you until this is all over. One guy hadn't seen his kids in 6 weeks, and it's just killing him. Yes, he can FaceTime with them. Yes, he has regular technology contact with them, but that's not the same as hugging your child before they go to bed at night. And so it's just that hard. We're going to have to do the best we can and love each other through this. And I think most kids, unless they're really young, they understand. They can get their head around this, and they understand that it's affected a lot of things in our world. And so everybody knows it's temporary, we think. So there's those kinds of things to be mindful of. I think another one for blended families is, and this principle also applies to some other families as well. In fact, one of the things I've been saying to blended families is, look, the whole world is experiencing what you experience right now, every single day of your life. Social distancing, it was the response to, all right, our world is a little unsafe. We feel a little threatened, and we don't know what to do about it. So we're going to retreat back to the places and the people that are the most comfortable, most safe for all of us. All right. That's social distancing. Well, that happens in a blended family on a pretty regular basis. Like today, I'm still trying to move toward you, but at the same time, I'm uncomfortable with this new relationship. And so I'm pulling away from you. So there's the forces moving toward, and there's social distancing that happens between the step family relationships. Mm-hmm. And I'm pulling back to people that I feel, when stress in particular comes up in our family, I pull back to the people that are the closest to me, that are the safest to me. And that's my biological parent, and that's my siblings. And I pull away from, social distance from, my step parent, my step siblings. And so it's kind of like the whole world is getting a little window into some of the dynamics that go on a fairly regular basis for step families. And so what do you do? Well, it's okay to retreat back a little bit, but from time to time, you want to try to orchestrate some togetherness time so that you're moving toward one another. This same principle is going to apply, Chris, to a family who's just tired of each other. It doesn't matter if they're a step family or, they're just kind of tired of all being on top of each other in the same space. You need a little break every now and then. That's okay. If we have a little conflict, is it okay to have a little time where we pull back and we don't necessarily have to jump in and fix it right away? Yes, I think that's okay to do. You don't want to avoid it forever. You can't just put off working through the conflict, whatever it is, forever. But it's okay to have some wisdom and say, let it go. We're, everybody's kind of uptight. We'll come back to that eventually.
So you're talking about working through conflict.
Mm-hmm.
This may be a dumb question. I know you're always taking a chance with me. I might ask a dumb question, but people are looking at their lives right now. They're listening to what you're saying, and they're going, okay, I recognize 1, 2, 3, these points of conflict in my family, but I do not know how to have a conversation about that with my spouse or with my child, or perhaps it's a single person and they're interacting with someone else in their extended family, or there's conflict with a friend and there's some social distancing there. How do we have a healthy conversation about conflict in these times?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, you just brought up a subject that we could spend hours unpacking and talking through. So let me just try to hit a couple of tips.
Okay.
The best place to start when it comes to a conflict is asking yourself, what is going on with me? What is my need within this frustration or this gripe that I have? My need is I'm feeling disconnected from you. My need is I feel unimportant when you seem to always get your space, but I don't get my space. It feels unfair. There's something underneath that. So what's my need? And understanding that so that you can articulate the need in such a way. Now, here's what's crucial. articulate that in such a way that the other person can hear your need, not just hear the criticism or the negativity that goes with it. And so that takes self-control. You want to talk about a fruit of the spirit moment. It's when I'm really angry, but I have to communicate what my need is underneath the anger in such a way that you actually hear the need, not just my anger. At the end of the day, that will do far more towards helping the two of you figure out a way through that circumstance than anything. If I start off just in anger and erupt, then you're now defensive. You're now reacting to my anger. You're now feeling unsafe. We're both feeling unsafe. So we're both social distancing.
Yeah.
It just feeds on itself and it goes in all the wrong ways. So there's a lot of mechanisms in this. I have to calm down enough to say, what's going on? Why am I angry? What's this all about? Like that whole process sometimes takes a lot of time. It certainly takes a lot of discipline, takes some humility. And most of us are just honestly don't do that. We're unwilling to even ask that question.
Do you think part of the problem in that now, do you think part of the problem in that is that we are living in such a quick fix world that to settle ourselves to the point where we can speak out of here is my need. Here's how I'm.
Yeah, I think that may be a factor. But honestly, it's just far more visceral than that. The neurology behind this is just fascinating. It's brain science. When you get dysregulated, you basically stop thinking. You go into fight, flight, or freeze, and you're reacting. And your brain is designed to react quickly and with force to either create distance so that you're safe, to either go against or move towards so that you can be aggressive in some way. That's the fight. Or the freeze is, I don't know what to do, so I'm just kind of locked up and I'm just, I don't even know what's going on with me. I'm flooded. I don't even know how to describe this. All of those are neurological in the sense that it's instantaneous millisecond response set. And in other words, over time in our life, we develop these sensitivities to certain things that make us feel certain ways, and we get reactive to them. And so here you go, you just stepped on my toes again. And that set off everything inside me that says, life's unfair, you're unfair, you don't really care about me. And so I'm mad. And instantaneously I'm angry. And now I'm just being angry, and I'm not slowing all that down enough to say, what's going on with me? What's my real need here? So there's a discipline in managing conflict that requires me to look in the mirror.
I have so many questions, but
yeah. So, one way to think of this whole COVID crazies is we get a lot of opportunity to practice being self-disciplined and looking in the mirror and saying, okay, what is this going on in me? And what do I do with this in a way that is actually invites the other person into understanding what my need is, so we can figure out how to accomplish that. Again, there's a lot there to unpack, but I think that is at the heart of it.
We did not talk about this part of our conversation before we started doing this. So this may be a really unfair question, but can you give us an example of what that looks like to have a conversation of where you're articulating your need in a way that is like, what does that sound like?
Yeah. So let me brag on my wife. So this morning she did this. We were having our little talk about the day scheduling moment. And one of the things that came up is she said, would it be okay if we grab some lunch today? Like, she knew I had a schedule that was pretty demanding all morning and into the afternoon. And so she said, could you take an hour and let's just get out of the house and get some sunshine? And I said, man, I don't know. And she just saw that look on my face of distress, like, oh, you don't know what I have to get done. And then I said, I'll tell you what I could do. You could maybe grab something, come home, we'll sit out on the deck and take 30 minutes and eat it. And she was like, oh, okay. I was kind of hoping for more than that, but all right. So she said okay, but inside she was really feeling unimportant, because she knew that I was giving you an hour of my day, and I was giving another person 30 minutes of my day, and then I had a phone.
Yeah.
So, and for her, that was like, okay, this just shouts. Maybe Ron doesn't care as much as you hope he does.
Mm-hmm.
So about 10 minutes later, by then I'm in my office. She comes to the door and she says, I got to revisit this. And in a very calm fashion, very clear, articulated what I just shared with you.
Mm-hmm.
What I really was wanting was some more time with you. I know what's ahead of us this weekend, and I was just hoping that we could have a window of time. And to be honest, I don't have much else to do today. And I got some things I got to do this morning and this afternoon, but I got this space, and I was just looking forward to having a little time with you, and I need that. Well, at that point, my heart softens. Like, if she come at me with anger, my heart gets harder and defensive, because I know me. Defensiveness is one of my spiritual gifts. That and sarcasm, which I just used. So she, and I'll
I
probably
know that one well.
I'll use that one again, by the way. But the fact that she was soft and direct, and yet here's my need within that. Well, my heart just softened, and I'm like, you know what? I do need to lower my expectations. I do need to let go of some of those things that I was putting on myself, and it's really going to be okay. I'm glad to do that. Let's go have lunch.
Mm.
So we did. And, there was no leftover animosity on her part or resentment or that's just huge, right?
Sure.
That's a mature love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control moment that takes what was a conflict, but allowed us to figure out what the need was within it, go around it, and find a different way to respond.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Um, how do we make the most of this time in terms of uh, we're prepping for things to open back up
Mm.
and move towards some sort of normal?
Yeah, hope is on the horizon, I
Yeah,
think.
hope is on the horizon. So, what can families, individuals be doing to
Mm.
make themselves ready for reentry to some sort of normal in the future?
I got to tell you, I'm a little apprehensive about answering this. I've been asked this a couple of times, and I'm apprehensive because I don't know exactly what that is going to look like, what reentry is going to look like,
Mhm.
what pieces we're going to have to hang on to. You can go to a restaurant, but you got to wear a mask. You're going to have to sit so far apart. And by the way, have you noticed not everybody has the same definition of 6 feet that you do?
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know, I know it's a mathematical thing, but some people think it's really about 4 feet, and some people think it is 10 feet. Like, that's a part of negotiating our spaces. And we have to do that in life and in relationships and even in our own home. And when we start going back into life, whatever that means, we're going to have to do that again. Like, every little step here is a redefinition of how we do things. And it's awkward and it's strange. And by the way, one little way I have of managing that is I make a little joke out of it, make a little fun out of it, but I make it overt pretty quickly. So I walking down the sidewalk and here's a neighbor, like, how close are we going to get?
Yeah.
Just put a smile on your face and go, yeah, I guess we got to keep 6 feet, right? And just kind of, you've said it out loud, and now it takes the awkwardness and the sting out of it a little bit. As we start going back into life, I think we got to have to do that socially. I think we're going to have to do that with our children, define for them, all right, kids, this is what this means. We're going over to their place, but we're not doing this. We are going to do that. Try to help one another have some expectation of what this means. And we feel our way through, which means we step on toes every once in a while. We make a mistake and we pull back and we learn from it. Sure, that's all part of it. But I hesitate to be really clear about do this, don't do that, because I just
Mhm.
don't even know what's going to be required of us. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's really fair because you're right. I mean, none of us know exactly what this is going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of things that you've said, or themes, I think that have come out in this conversation, for me at least, are practice a tremendous amount of grace
Mm-hmm.
and also practice a tremendous amount of self-control.
Yeah.
And I would say the ultimate umbrella of that is do all this in the name of Jesus.
Mm.
You talked about true north multiple times. Fun fact, I actually wanted to call Compass Church True North, and
Hmm.
creative people didn't like that, so I got shut down.
Yeah, no, it really, and self-control is the word. I mean, just about a week ago, I hit a wall. I don't know that I could explain. I was trying to share with my wife later that day, like, I don't even know what was going on. Like, I had to talk through it to figure out what was happening. It turns out there was some work pressure. There were some deadlines. There were some things that were not happening right. I couldn't get to the right people because we're working over the internet. I didn't have the information I needed, couldn't get the job done, really frustrated. Add to it, this room got hot, I'm not in the right space. There were 3 or 4 little things that were just, and I was just tired of working at home, sitting in this same chair. And I hit a wall, and it was like, I don't know what I need, but my blood pressure's up. I need to go for a walk. I need to get outside. I need to kiss the dog. I don't know what I need to do. I need something right now different from what I have. That is self-control. There's no other thing to call that except that is a self-control moment. I think a lot of us walk around in life. Here's one cultural comment that I'll make. I think our world expects everybody else to make my life so that I don't have to feel those feelings. That is not going to happen. That is not the way the world works. It is my job to deal with me in that moment, bring it to the Lord, say, God, help me with this, and put on some self-control.
I want to be really mindful of our time because I know you squeezed this in the middle of a variety of things. So 2 questions as we wrap up. All the scientists say that, well, I should say, many scientists say that there will be a second round of coronavirus this fall, winter. So as my wife likes to watch a lot of those homesteader shows, they drive me a little crazy because I don't want to be a homesteader. But nonetheless, they're always talking about working really hard to be ready for the winter and all the challenges of the winter. What would you say for us in terms of relationships, family dynamics, in terms of getting ready to maybe go through this again?
A simple family conversation could be, okay, what have we learned that has been helpful? And we're going to hold on to that. What are we going to let go of if and when this comes back around? And what do you wish we would have done that we hadn't done before? A simple little conversation. What are the takeaways? What are the leave behinds that we don't want to bring with us? I actually think we would, as a culture, jump into the coping much more quickly if it were to come back, because we have been there, we have done that, we do know something about that space. Now, the changes might be related to economics, and there may be some new things on the horizon there if we get another round of this that changes people's lives and changes our society, more than it has this time around. I don't know about that. But I just think we'll jump into it easier. As odd as that is, there's something about having experienced it before that does make it a little easier the second time around. Fears won't get out of line. Our anxiety, fears and anxiety were running really high at the beginning because nobody knew what we were dealing with.
Right.
It would be a little bit like saying, yeah, it's flu season again. Like we do have a sense of what that means at this point. And so I think it would be less fear, less anxiety, less overreacting from people. We would not be happy about having to deal with it again, stay-at-home mandates. But I think we could do it.
That's great. Great answer. Last question. at Compass Church, we talk a lot about we are a people who are simply following Jesus,
Mm.
Which has been a tremendous joy to make that a centerpiece of who we are and raising that question and doing that. What does that look like? Simply following Jesus. What does that look like for Ron and Nana this season? And what would you encourage us with as we wrap up?
Man, I key in on the word simple. Quick observation. My wife, in interacting with her students and families and other teachers and the kids, one thing positive that we've seen come out of this is that people have gotten a little more simple in how they do life.
Mm-hmm.
All of us have gotten more simple in that we're not running ragged to this activity and that activity and 6 things for the kids. We're not running to movies and spending money at restaurants, and like we're living more simply. We're resting in what we have. We have a better perspective on where we are versus what we want to grow and build to, and we got to accomplish and climb and go. And like, I think we're just being more than doing right now. And I think that's a really good thing. By the way, from a kid point of view, one of the observations we've seen is that children are actually playing with their parents, spending time at home. Yes, there's that fight over screen time and enough's enough, but we're actually seeing some interaction between parents and kids that they normally farming them out and taking them to that activity or soccer or whatever. It's not happening. They're actually more family centric. And I think that is a very good thing. Kids are learning to ride bikes. Kids are learning how to draw and create. Some of the stuff, like, the older generations would say, well, back in our day, we didn't have all this stuff and games and to entertain, and we just had to make our own fun. There's something to be said about having creative moments, just simply finding your way through. Okay, so take that little parallel, and let's say, what if spiritually, through all of this, we were all being a little recalibrated back to simple? Live life, walk with God, talk to Him, rely on Him. This whole experience is teaching us a little bit about daily bread. Yes. Instead of filling up our, refrigerator with food and stuff and buy and go, and we're living simply, and we are trusting in God more simply than we ever have. I am quite confident that that is a good thing. We are getting in touch again with True North in very simple ways. And I hope, for me and for everyone, that we hold on to that when we are given permission to go back to normal, that we will at least take this calibration with us.
It's a great word. Ron, thank you for making time to do this today.
Yeah, glad to do it. It's good to see you again, buddy.
Good to see you again. Thank you to you and Nan for your ministry and what you've meant to our family and how you've encouraged us. And right before we came on, I was just saying everybody needs a Ron Dill in their life. So I'm really grateful. So Ron, thanks again, and really appreciate you making time to do this today.
Glad to do it. Take care.
All right.